All right. Can everyone see the screen sharing?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So again, I apologize that I have a whole slide. I'll try to keep it brief to help introduce myself. But as I think Karthik mentioned at the beginning, so my name is Dan McLeod. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. I am about to start a new role on Monday as the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Grand Rounds Health. So won't go into the company too much, but in terms of what I'll specifically be owning, so they're a health tech startup, Series E, based out of the Bay Area in the US. And I will be owning the positioning, value proposition, and overall storyline, pricing, competitive intelligence, some of the marketing strategy elements for their main product, healthcare navigation. Got my MBA from Kellogg a few years ago, graduated from Tufts in 2012 with a BA in psychology, and originally grew up in Chevy Chase, Maryland, currently live in Chicago. So this professional background is heavily skewed towards ZS, where I've been working with Karthik for a little bit. It's where we met. But in terms of the industry, so focused primarily on digital health, but also have experience in a few other areas. So worked before my MBA in tech, specifically software as a service, and have worked across medical products and pharma as well. And in terms of the functional expertise, so it's all been on the commercial side, right? So it's all a combination of storytelling and figuring out commercial strategy and figuring out how to grow revenue for various products. And the all-important personal background. Again, we'll go through this relatively quickly, but when I'm not working, I love to travel. The last year has not made that easy, but love to travel, ski, hike, read. And I said when I'm not working because at ZS, you are often working. So I've not had as much time for that over the last couple of years as I generally like. Hopefully that'll change very soon. I am going to learn to fly. I know that's a big claim. So when I next speak with this group, whenever that may be, hopefully I'll have had my first lesson. And my fun fact is I essentially moved in with my parents during the pandemic because there was absolutely nothing happening in Chicago. So I've been living on a working farm, a horse farm in Virginia for over a year at this point. All right.
All right. And just a
actually here
fun fact that if you think my presentation skills are good, then Dan is my guru at ZS. He's fantastic. So I've seen him write and I've seen him present, even make presentations. And I didn't think there was a better person I could invite at ZS to host this session for us. I've secretly taken away his emails as templates for my emails, and I'm sure you guys will benefit as well.
Karthik, now that you've talked me up so much, I'll add the caveat that I have used 0 portions of my brain for 2 weeks since my last day at ZS. So I apologize in advance. This is my first attempt to actually articulate my thoughts in a while.
That's good.
But thank you, Karthik. Hopefully it's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, what are we going to do today, right? We have about a little under 2.5 hours left. So I figured we would start with just a little bit of background. And again, I apologize if for some folks this is too basic. I wanted to start from kind of the ground up, but we'll go through it relatively quickly, just in terms of why business emails are important, what some of the challenges are. And then we'll spend most of this section actually looking through a couple examples, right? So I'll have examples of kind of mediocre to bad business emails, followed by examples of the same email, but a better version and improved version. And this is not going to be a lecture. I have thoughts and I will share all of my thoughts about what makes them good or bad, but I'm going to make this group or ask this group to participate, right? I don't want to be talking for the next 2.5 hours. That is not fun for us. So we'll go through business emails 101, followed up by just some of the best practices after we finish those examples. We're going to then spend about an hour on an interactive writing exercise. So I hope everyone is very excited to actually get into it today. We'll go through some of the potential topics when we get there, followed by a little bit of time reserved for questions. And then depending on how long these first few sections take, we might pivot completely. This was an idea that Karthik threw out there that I really like. If we have time and if anyone is interested in just throwing out ideas for pitches, whether it's a current product you're working on or just kind of a completely new idea, I'd love to hear it. It's a very fun part of being in the startup world. So without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, again, I will not belabor the point. Everyone knows emails are more important than ever, right? We have new channels like Slack, we have Microsoft Teams, all these channels to improve informal communications and instant communications, but email's not going anywhere, right? So if you look at the actual numbers, average person in the US, average full-time worker, they get 120 emails a day, which is insane. And I think, Karthik, you and I can probably both attest that that is true.
That's absolutely
higher. It's ridiculous. That's for us, right? That's for kind of your average worker. You get up to the C level and it gets even more ridiculous, 500 plus emails a day. Steve Jobs, he got about, or sorry, I think it was actually Tim Cook, gets about 700 emails a day and responds to at least half of them.
wow.
That is, yeah, anyway, it is what it is. It's a lot of emails. And the average worker in the US spends almost a third of their time, just over a quarter of their time, on email, reading and writing emails, right? So what does this mean? Obviously, there is a huge challenge of email overload. There are entire companies, many companies dedicated specifically to helping sort and become more efficient about email. So for us, for business emails, what that means is often, right, you are conveying complex information. It's not always simple, and you need to do it succinctly and completely. So it needs to be super easy to read, but also have all of the right info. Business emails will be part of your brand, right? So you're a startup. When you are emailing, it has a heavy effect in terms of how people perceive you, your level of professionalism, how effective they believe you are. And if the email isn't written well, right, if it's lengthy, if it's unclear, if it feels a little bit unprofessional, it's going to be either deprioritized or maybe even just completely ignored. As one small anecdote, this is not the right way to do things, but as I mentioned, my brother has a startup. He's the founder and chief product officer for his startup, Series B. So it's 50 people, starting to get a little bit bigger. He checks his email once a week now. Again, that's not okay. He should not be doing that. But every time he checks his email, he literally goes through 2,000 plus emails. So yes, if it is not super clear very quickly, as in he can open it up on his phone and before he even scrolls, the key info is right there, he's going to ignore it. So all of that means, right, developing the ability to write effective emails, it's critical. And I'm saying this in business, also in personal, but it just, whatever the setting might be, if you're writing an email, people are so inundated today that you need to make it so easy for them to understand what you're trying to convey and what they need to do, if anything, that it's almost an afterthought. They just open it and know what they need to do. So let me actually pause before we jump into some of these examples. Any questions or comments on just these high-level stats? I'm not as familiar with the emailing situation in India or outside of the US. I'm assuming it's pretty crazy as well. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to pause here for a moment.
Just a comment is that over 90% of our customers and almost all of our investors are in the US. So while most of the team works out of India, they are serving a US-based audience, and that is an expectation that emails are picture perfect. We have had in the past upsetted our investors or customers because of spelling mistakes in emails or sending things to them which looked formal to us but rude to them, and so on. So it has hurt us in the past, and these ground basics make it all the more. I can relate to many of the things you're saying, simply because we relate to not doing these things, what we have lost.
Got it. So Karthik, I think on the typo front, all of that, like, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, only because it is important, right? But it's not something that I'm going to teach in a lecture, right? It needs to be right, spelling and all of that. For the emails that came across as a little less formal than the team was hoping, we don't have to do it now, but Karthik, if towards the end of this kind of first part of the session, if there are any that specifically come to mind that you want to pull up, I would be very happy to cover them, share my thoughts, if it'd be valuable, right? If you already know what went wrong and what could go better, no need to, but let me know later on if you want to do that.
Sounds good. Okay.
Cool. All right. So what we will do, we have a few email examples. I'm just going to pull it up, right? So they're not too long. They fit on one slide. And I want to give this group a couple minutes to read through, and then we'll just discuss. So before I get into the actual, my view of best practices, how I write emails that I perceive as strong business emails. I want to go through these examples and I'll share my thoughts, but I want to start by getting yours. Right, so for this first example, Steerco meeting minutes, these are all blinded. These are taken from, well, the good examples are taken from real client emails that were written while I was at ZS. These first examples are not meant to be perfect, right? There's plenty that's going to be wrong with these. I'd like to give you all maybe 2 minutes to read through and then just share with me what you think this actually does right, and then what does it not do right? What does it do? So we'll pause for a couple minutes here.
Just to help the team, SteerCo stands for Steering Committee, which is like a senior group of managers who oversee what you're doing.
Apologies, yeah. So Karthik, please jump in whenever I make an assumption that should be explained. I'm sure I will do that plenty. For Steerco, so this would be like the execs. This is not mid-level, this is senior level.
I can jump in with answering the question. So I would say that one thing that the email does do right is that it is a story, like there is a chronology and there is a greeting in the beginning, it's signed at the end. There's a slight call to action. Let us know if you have any follow-up questions, although that can be described a little bit or more specific to what they want the person to do. But then one thing that's wrong or can be improved is breaking up this text. So from my own experience, something that I use and that I was taught, wherever you can put in bullets or you can do like subtext, or just to give a little bit more of a readability to whoever you're sending the email. I think you don't need an addition, while, all of those more prose type of writing in an email. You want to try to keep it very straight to the point, where you can list things, list them, where you want a call to action, make that very clear that you want the person to do something. I think those are some of the comments I have.
100% yes. So in terms of what it does right, yeah, there's kind of a vague call to action. And as you mentioned, right, I think most of the keynotes, it feels like they're captured here, assuming that nothing is just blatantly missing. So that's good. It has the right content overall. Your suggestion about breaking it up, using bullets where possible, that's one of the first key pieces, right? So in my mind, writing executive communications, it's a balancing act. So the prose and, adding more prose and kind of fluffy language to make it sound nicer or less, I don't know, to humanize it a little bit versus just getting to the point quickly. There's no perfect right answer there, but in my mind, exec communications is all about balancing those two so that it does feel human. You are starting to build a little bit of a relationship. You kind of have some personality, some professional brand behind the email, but you're still keeping it super easy to scan quickly. Right. And again, there's no perfect ratio there. Sometimes it is right to just literally jump right into it and get to the point immediately. But regardless of how much of the personal side you add in or those additional prose, breaking up the text, even if it's either having very short kind of sentences or paragraphs, or just having as many bullets as possible, that is critical. If you take nothing else away from today, if you have a line, right, that's more than like, I don't know, 3 or 4 lines. If you have a paragraph that's more than 3 or 4 lines, break it up. It shouldn't be like that. This is not like writing a full-on paper, right? It should be incredibly easy for them to scan with minimal effort. Anyone else? I think those are honestly probably the main points, but there are a couple other smaller ones. So would appreciate any other feedback or comments as well.
I noticed that there are a lot of abbreviations used. So I see that it's a minutes meeting, so that's probably why. But a person reading it, I'm wondering what IDN is, or what the other abbreviations could mean. So that is something that.
Yep, and actually, so that is, I think actually, you know what? It probably should be written out here anyway, just in case somebody doesn't know what it is. But in general, this group would have been familiar with that. So IDN is Integrated Delivery Network. which is basically, it's a hospital system within the US. But no, I think you are correct. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think as consultants, Karthik, you probably know this as well as I do, especially if you're ever sending slides offline, we always use too many abbreviations and it always ends up being a problem. We just assume that everyone knows all ridiculous abbreviations. All right, anything else? Otherwise, I'll share a couple thoughts of my own.
Yeah, jumping into add the same thing what Kenza said. However, a couple of additions. Besides the points being discrete, the contents could be categorized. Say, for example, the top, whenever you put a minutes of meeting, there ideally lies a couple of things like the things that you discussed and then things that you take forward as tasks or action items for the next meeting, right? And those could be categorized to have a clear picture of what could be taken up in the next meeting. With that, the delivery dates or something like that over the action items and the concerned person. Say, for example, I saw in somewhere that we agreed, ZS agreed that we will be proceeding so and so. The concerned people could be tagged over in the same email when they are added to the to or CC column, right? So that helps the persons to actually stay intact with exactly what they have to do. That's one addition.
Yep. Yeah. See, I know I didn't send out these slides ahead of time, but as you'll see when we go to the next one, yes, that is also very important. Awesome. All right. So yeah, let me just jump into a couple other minor points. The only other pieces I had was, this is 100% personal, but I think there is an opportunity here, right? If it doesn't feel natural, don't do it. But I think sometimes, especially when you're interacting primarily via email and Zoom, if you want to start building a little bit more of a relationship, there's a chance to kind of make this a little more personal. Now, this isn't bad, right? Again, I think this is totally okay, but you'll see when I go to the next slide that I'm trying to build a little bit of excitement with this intro, with the pleasantries before we jump into the meeting minutes. Venkat, as you mentioned, the minutes aren't well organized. It's almost like a stream of consciousness, right? It's not like, oh, here are the actions, here are the key takeaways, here are the groupings, here are the different topics that we covered, right? It's clear that we covered ID and engagement and regulatory pathways, but then the actual meeting minutes jumble everything together. And then the last piece is, this is very clear about exactly who said what, right? And it's almost like, here's he said, she said, they weren't really sure, I guess we'll decide in the future. So this is part of the art of it as well, but like, you can't do that. You generally can't do that. So Karthik, imagine the client that we worked on together, if you'd named specific names in the SteerCo meeting minutes when you sent those out, we would have been skewered for that. So you have to find a way to kind of, if you're not exactly sure what the final decision is, you have to frame it as something like, you know, points brought up, multiple points brought up on two possible paths will reconvene at the next meeting to finalize decision or something like that. You can't say Mike and Ashley and who exactly said what when you're sending out those minutes. So honestly, those are the main points. Let me jump to the final version that was sent out. Now, again, it's not the only way to do it. It's not meant to be perfect, but it's better. It's an improved SteerCo meeting minutes example. So I'll give everyone a chance to read through, but essentially, a little bit on the pleasantries, right? A little bit more upfront, trying to build that relationship. And then I'll give everyone a moment to read through, but it's the same info, both with a tiny bit more detail about exactly what's happening, but also a lot easier to scan, given the organization and the bullets used. Also, apologies, we say client XYZ. Some of this is blinded. Try not to give the actual exact info away, but those were specific health systems, specific client name, all that. So as I mentioned, I will send this out, this final version to Karthik, so he can disseminate to the rest of the team. So you'll have this offline, can review it, later on as well. I don't think we need to spend as much time on this slide, given that it's essentially implements the suggestions that were brought up on the previous slide. But if anyone does have questions or comments on how this is organized or how you could think it might be organized better, very happy to talk through that now before we move on.
I just have a question, Dan. So since most of our recipients read their emails on the phone, does writing content below the signature, is it good? Because unlike on this email example, our signatures can be very bulky, right? Like we have images and something like that.
So what I do, yeah, Karthik, great question. What I do, and again, doesn't have to be the only way to do it. I have this, so I would say best Dan, and then my actual full ZS signature would be below everything, just at the bottom of the email. So the way the phone interprets that, it would not cut off all of this content.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the last thing, and you'll see this on one of the email examples in just a moment. If I had a specific call to action for someone, this is basically just documenting what we did, right? You can see there's no actual action for anyone on the client side. This is just, here's what we talked about, well organized. If we ever need to refer to this, it's all here. If I had a specific action item for one or two people on the client side, it still probably wouldn't make sense to include that for them up here. It'd feel a little bit awkward if there are 12 people on the email and one person's called out right at the top where everyone can see it. What I'd probably do is in the next steps, add a little sub bullet or another bullet here and just at them, right? Use the at function to call them out so that their attention is drawn to that specific call to action immediately. But it's not putting them front and center with a group of 12 or however many people there are.
Mm-hmm.
The other option, if you don't want to basically sign off and say best Karthik and then also have your signature at the bottom, is just tweak the language a little bit, right? And don't have the best here, just say see below and then have the best Karthik or whatever at the bottom instead. Mm-hmm. So I think from what you're saying, Karthik, as well, or from what I've heard about this team, it seems like this skill set, kind of just writing exec meeting minutes, right? It's not complicated, but it sounds like it is one of the most important things that this team does, both for clients and investors. Mm-hmm. So if any questions come up after this session, right, or again, if you have examples of exec meeting minutes that the team has drafted that would be helpful to review, very happy to do so either live or after the session as well, offline. All right, any last questions before we move on? Cool. Okay, we have 3 examples total. I tried to cover different types of business emails with each. So example number 2, group email, trying to get a couple people to do something specific. So it's a combo of an update and a call to action. We'll give everyone a moment to read and then would love to hear same thing, right? What does this do well? What does it not do well?
I know there's a lot here to unpack, but I'll just say what's top of my mind. Definitely the subject. Most of us, we search for the email by subject, and having it very specific and detailed might make it much more easier to find out what it is.
Yep, I mean, Karthik, so 100% yes, and even a lot of it depends, maybe less relevant for your startup right now, but for ZS, this person probably works with ZS on a bunch of different projects as well, right? I see ZS project, I'm like, cool, which of the 10 projects? Like what, that's not very helpful for me. So yeah, completely right.
And the addressing part, I think it's a group email, but addressed to just Jim.
Yeah, and so that's, let me add a little context here. So that'll depend, right? So in this situation, let's assume that Jim should be he's the lead, right? So he's the primary kind of leader of this project. And let's say the other 2 people are CC'd on the email. So you're right that is something to keep in mind. If everyone should be addressed equally, then you should say hi all or hi team or whatever. In this case, it is an update for Jim. And these other 2 folks, Meredith and Mike, are part of the team, but they're not really part of the core team. They're stakeholders that are involved, but not as central, and they'd be CC'd.
Okay, I feel the last sentence can be a bit subtle rather than explaining it straight.
Yes, it does feel a little bit like we are blaming them and upset with them for ignoring us.
Exactly.
Now, they are ignoring us, so we are upset with them, but obviously that shouldn't come out that directly in an email. Anything else? Let me rephrase. There are a few other things, but any other thoughts that the team wants to share?
I was just gonna say, maybe I would say hi, Jim, and then maybe a pleasantry. Like I'm used to saying, I hope you're doing well, or just something like that. And then if it's an update and then a call for certain members of the team, I would say, hi, Jim, hope you're doing well. He knows it's an update, so that's expected. So I would just maybe put update on the team's meeting, or just give it a short context, a colon, and then put those in bullets here again. So what the team worked on. And then in the second paragraph, maybe that's in next steps. So maybe next steps, and then mention Meredith and Mike and say, can you let me know, update Meredith and at Mike, please update us on the workshop materials from 2 weeks ago. I think.
Kenza, that is fantastic. And you covered, I think, most of the things that will be changed on the next version of the email. So yeah, you nailed it. There may be a couple small things. So if anyone else has thoughts as well, happy to hear them. But yeah, Kenza, you got most of it right there, combined with the other thoughts shared.
Dan, I'm not sure about this, but I see in the second part, we need your input to finalize the model for Jim again.
Second last statement.
Yeah, we are addressing Mike and the other person. And again, we are saying that we need to finalize this to build a Jim, but it is addressed to Jim as well, right? Is this right? I'm not sure. I'm just bringing this up.
Yeah, so I think again, it's here. I'll show you how we ended up handling this. But you're right; it doesn't really work cleanly here because it does address it to Jim, and then it feels like Meredith and Mike are actually the key people. It's like, well, are Meredith and Mike, if they've been ignoring us, are they even going to get here? Right? They're going to see hi Jim and just ignore the rest of the email immediately, like they've done previously. So yes, you're correct that should be changed a bit. I think that we covered basically everything that I had. So what does it not do right? Subject line, nailed it, Karthik. Doesn't include appropriate level of detail. Yeah, so not only is this, like, should this be in bullet form, right? So it's easier to scan, but this, I mean, it gives me some info, but not really. We're working on the model specifications. Okay, yeah, that's not really an update. The update is things that happened. So that's one piece, right? It should be in bullet form, but also include, it should actually be an update, not just a kind of big statement. And then the last piece, other than just feeling like it is attacking Meredith and Mike, it doesn't really give them the right context, right? So one, I mean, it could be attached here, but it doesn't really say anything about that. Like the workshop materials should be attached. We should make their life as easy as possible, especially if we're having trouble getting their input. So, you know, workshop materials attached here for reference or something like that, so that it's right there. They don't have to go hunting in their emails. And then the same thing that I mentioned before, right? They're going to ignore this. They're not going to get here. We know that from the fact that they've ignored our previous messages. So there should be some more effective way to call their attention to the relevant portion of the email for them. The last thing, and this is partially personal preference, but I think in this context, it is not the appropriate way to do it. There's too much I and my, there's too much personal stuff here versus team stuff, right? It's like, we want to make this as professional as possible and not tie it to ourselves. It's the ZS team, we're one team. So following up on our modeling project, we wanted to update you instead of I wanted to. The team or the ZS team finished instead of my team, right? So small thing, but it matters with execs. The small, seemingly dumb things, they do catch on to it, and it does impact kind of their perception of how professional and well So I'm going to talk through this one a little bit more because, again, there's no perfect way to do this, but this is what we did here. And it did work. We did end up getting the feedback that we needed. So one, we actually added a subject line. It could be even more detailed, but for this specific client, we knew that this would be plenty. He only had one modeling project for this with the ZS team on this. So pleasantries added up front, as mentioned before. A little bit more context, right? So it's been 2 weeks, or even I think this might have even been 3 weeks since the workshop. So need to basically set that context of what we're even talking about, what we agreed on at the workshop, clearly bullet it out so it is easier to scan and bold across 3 key areas, and actually include the update, right? Lit review, complete, report is being finalized, model specifications, development is underway, model gap analysis. What are we actually doing here? Right? If we haven't talked about this in weeks and it was like a 2-hour workshop, he's not going to remember. So we both say what we're doing and where we're focused for the previous discussion. And then the last piece for all of these updates is clarifying again, what did we agree on and are we on track? Right? So we agreed, or we know that Jim, the client, needs the gap analysis at a certain time. Cool. We are on track to deliver it at that time. So the update is easier to scan, includes the key pieces and relevant info if he wants to read beyond the bold words. And we're very clear that this should meet what we'd agreed on and Jim's expectations for the. And then the last piece, and this is again, partially personal preference. There are a couple ways you could do this. So one, we use the @ functionalities. So Meredith and Mike will actually, they'll have this called out in their Outlook, so their attention will be drawn. So one, they'll actually see this, or they should see it. We could have brought this paragraph with the request for them up to the top of the email, but since they are not the core members of this, and we're almost not trivializing, but we're making it clear, as you'll see when you read through the details here, they're no longer key, right? They won't give us input. So we're basically saying we're moving ahead. If you want to give input, we're very happy to incorporate it, but it's in their court. It is in their court. They will no longer be a roadblock. So we're both calling their attention to it and covering ourselves where they have had every opportunity to provide input. Jim, the key stakeholder, is the primary recipient of the email and is fully in the loop on this. And if they don't respond, we're not complaining. We are just stating facts at this point, right? Where it's on them if they don't want to carve out the time to give a little bit. Give just a moment for folks to read through the full email. And if there are any questions or comments, again, there's no perfect way to do this, or there's not only one right way. So would definitely appreciate reactions from the team.
I have a question. I know it sounds much better to say it seems for Meredith and Mike, it seems that we have been unable to connect, but does Jim need to know that?
Jim, so yeah, and again, that's what, so like in this context, yes. Because okay. Jim, so yeah, so like it's tough to pull out individual emails when this project was like a 4-month project, right? So there's a lot of background here. You're asking the right question. In this context, Jim is specifically the one who who requested that they provide feedback, and has been CC'd on all of the communications to them where they have not provided feedback. So it's almost, this is more of a reminder for Jim than for Meredith and Mike, since he probably forgot over the last few weeks what's happened. Okay. But we're putting it here because we don't want to specifically say, hey, Jim, your team is ignoring us.
Yeah.
I just want to additionally call out 2 things here. First is the last paragraph. If you see the way Dan has phrased it, even though it's like saying that, hey, we're going to ignore you because you're not keeping in touch with us, the way he's phrased it is as if he's offering support. We have been unable to connect and we would like to touch base. So if you're going to scold them by essentially for their mistake by offering support, it has a much more easier, greater response, because now they feel obliged. They might feel guilty and they might get back soon. At least they'll put in the same thing, at least sorry, so-and-so is happening, versus reacting to the scolding. And that we've seen happen with our customers when they don't pay us on time and we follow up with them. Another thing is the paragraph right before it, which is we have in our notes that you need the gap analysis by next week. A very specific deadline, Monday end of day, which is bulleted. So getting the person's attention towards a very specific deadline and mentioning it assertively, saying we are currently on track, even though it's like a work in progress. So we are currently on track and it will be done by this thing. That I think that phrasing was something that I started observing in Dan's emails in ZS. That nothing would be transient. It will not be like this is going on, it's work in progress. While that is the update, he would also end it by saying a very clear deadline that associates with it. So being assertive about what the next step is and being supportive when you want to scold someone, I think these are two additional things you should notice on this email.
And Karthik, so one, thank you for those additional comments. I half the time don't actually know, I write emails without consciously thinking through each piece, since you've probably deconstructed my emails more than I have. So please jump in whenever. That is very helpful. Couple quick points to add on to that. So with this Meredith and Mike piece, right? So I completely agree. This is really tough to do. And that's not like, I don't want to, I don't want to make it a bigger deal than it is, but this is one of the most important pieces, because you will always have clients who are misbehaving in some way or who are not giving you what you need, right? So how do you effectively basically call them out on it, but they're still the client. So how do you call them out on it without angering them? Or how do you call them out on it in such a way where even if they're angry, right? If they then, let's say that they forward this to their boss or to their boss's boss, right? And they're like, oh, I can't believe what ZS or what the company said. You want to write it in a way where their boss would respond with, what are you talking about? Like, this is a very pleasant exchange. Versus if you'd written it a little more aggressively and they did that, the boss then might get mad at you too. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is, and I'm jumping ahead to kind of the best practices. This is not rocket science, but you always have to know what the purpose of your email is, right? Before you actually write it, know why you're writing it. And so the reason I'm saying that is for an email like this, sometimes there's no real action for the main person. It's just a best practice. If a lot has changed and you haven't connected for weeks, you need to be documenting what you are doing and sharing that with them, so that if things do end up going off track, or if the client forgot what they wanted and changed their mind, it's documented somewhere, right? So email is a combo of updates, sometimes asking for simple decisions, and sometimes it is just documenting so that you have a trail for what was agreed on, when it was agreed on. And if they disagree with something, you want that in writing. You want it in writing, and you want it earlier versus later, right? Versus next week when we'll be connected. Also, the reaction to this wasn't super positive. Meredith and Mike just didn't like us very much. So they did not have the most pleasant reaction, but that's okay. We can always stay professional, and they might get upset and they may write passive aggressive or actively aggressive things in their emails. I don't know. We still had a great relationship with the main client. Like, nothing went wrong on our end because we maintained the professional demeanor, calling them out, but doing so in a nice way versus escalating our own level of aggression alongside theirs. Sorry, Karthik, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just trying to call out our team at CAAPID Simplified. This is not specific to just email. While the hackathon is around business email, since we communicate such updates to our clients even through text messages, through WhatsApp, the format and context can be the same way. Unless otherwise, you need an instantaneous response. Like if me and Dan want an instantaneous response to each other, then we would just put like a 2-line message saying, hey, what's up, blah, blah. But whenever we're sharing updates, we make sure even in our text messages, we are this detailed and bulleted when we share that over. So do not assume that this format is only specific to email and that channel. Any form of professional communication we have with clients, no matter the channel, can take this format as long as you don't need like an instantaneous reply or decisions.
The only thing I'd change, Karthik, I agree. The only thing I'd change if this were a text, other than, I would include a little less detail. It's just, it's not gonna, the format, you can't format it as cleanly in a text message, right? At least in like a standard SMS. I would put this up front in a text. I think here it feels okay to me. I can't explain exactly why, but again, there's no action. It's just kind of giving the details and then where we're going. If I texted him, the one key piece of info for Jim would be, hey, we're on track, and then we're just documenting the rest. So I think it's always important to have the key pieces of your email up front for the most part, but there are exceptions to that. Text, I don't think there are ever exceptions. It just, yeah, there's more of a sense of immediacy, of course, with text messages. So get to the point faster. But as Karthik mentioned, I'd still say basically, hope you're having a great week. Just wanted to let you know we're on track to deliver our key items by Monday end of day. All right, one more example. So this is the same client example as the previous one, but we're updating another key stakeholder. Karthik, some of this might look familiar to you.
I know who Meredith and Mike are.
Do you know who you'll probably figure out who Emily is as well. Okay. So just to give the context here, Meredith and Mike never ended up giving feedback. Our key stakeholder, Jim, kind of the project lead, has been working with us well, but we're having trouble moving forward. Emily is kind of the head honcho. So the highest very senior level person that is essentially the overall project sponsor. So I'll give you a moment to read this update for Emily, and then we'll talk through what's good and what's bad here.
Again, the subject, need to mention the project name, for which project is the update being given, something like that.
Yep. You're correct, although let me add one piece here. Normally, yes, for this specific email, this would be coming from the ZS partner to the head person updating them. So they know what it's about already. It's just, yeah, you're right. In this specific context, I don't think it's quite as needed because of who the sender would be. But yes, if you were sending this email, you'd want to be more specific about project name and what's happening.
I feel the first para feels so negative. Like I feel the whole content can be reduced in a line or so, in a couple of lines, rather than like so many sorries and unfortunately and all those stuff.
100% agree. Spending way too much time on the negative piece up front, and it's not needed. It makes an even bigger deal out of it, right? Oh, this is all terrible. We're so sorry. Oh, it's the team's fault. They're not giving us what we need.
Hey, Dan, this is Nourah. I just joined late, so
welcome.
This email, I think the one thing that just jumped out on me was that when we're given an update and we're going to give some unhappy news, maybe like put the positives on top, like what's good that's happened, like what progress you've made before talking about, what are the negative things and why we can't complete. Because I feel like I don't want to read further when, you're telling me that this project is not going to end on time.
So there's no right answer. No, I'm just thinking out loud. So it depends on who you're sending it to. So you might, okay, it depends on two things: who you're sending it to and what the main purpose of the email is. So just for context on this one, what you just described would probably be correct if the person hadn't been plugged into the project for weeks on end, right? If it's just a general status update and this piece where there's a delay is just one piece of the status update. For this specific email, the key stakeholder one was already aware that there's an issue and had been briefly mentioned on the phone, and they basically said, email me with more info so that they could then forward it to their team and yell at them.
Okay.
That's one piece. And then the other piece is for this specific client, they just want to know the bad news first, right? Some people want to know good, some people want to know bad first. So that's, yeah, I think either could honestly work equally well, depending on but I think that the point that was made up front, that this is just belaboring the point, right? This is too much on what's going wrong. That should be shortened. So even if we start with the bad first, it should be a line versus a full 3 lines, multiple sentences. All right, anything else?
Hey Dan, on the second paragraph, actually, discussing about the progress. First, they say it's a determined one, but there's some level of uncertainty in the lines following up. But again, they say they will make it up by saying that we believe that workable model could be put together, and some signs of uncertainty is there in the whole para. I mean, that's what I feel to jump in.
Yep, you are correct. And so the thing here is there is uncertainty, right? They're actually, the team, the ZS team is not sure, but we do believe that a workable model could be put together. So you don't want to lie. You don't want to say that, we're 100% sure about this, but you could definitely rephrase it. And you'll see in the next one, you can rephrase it so that the uncertainty is expressed, but the overall kind of theme or vibe behind it is more positive, where it's a good thing versus we're not sure. We're not sure, and we also don't have complete control over this project, which is what you kind of get in this email here. So why don't I hear? Let me jump in. Oh, yeah, sorry. One more thought. Very happy to hear.
Yeah, sorry for that. So, as actually I meant that it started with the level of certainty that we determined we could, and then it's dropped to the bottom. Like, you could end up like, having the readers like, okay, they could going to do something, but at the end it'll be like the level of expectation will be dropped at the very bottom, right? So, could rephrase at the start, right? That would be a better thing, I think. I'm sorry.
Yep. So I think that we.
Sorry, I just have a question slash comment, and maybe you can discuss that right after this. But since it's a problem that's being brought up, that the project is delayed, I would think that you would want to include the solution. So how are you going to solve this problem? So either you take a point and you go problem solution. So you break it down by categories. But I mean, I don't know too much about the context, but I do think that it should be maybe one line for the problem. So that whole first paragraph, especially if Emily already knows about it. So maybe just a one line. I'm sure you've already expressed that you were sorry, and then just go straight into what are we going to do about this? Because that's all she's going to really care about.
Completely correct. And so you'll see when we get to the next slide. I don't know if we did this as well as we could have, but it's also just such a mess that, you'll see what we did. But that's, you don't want to just say everything is broken, help, you want to.
One thing, I don't know if this was mentioned, I got dropped in the middle, but the big thing that's bugging me is the project will no longer be able to finish on time. Has this been mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah, it's that's really bugging me in my mind. So it's like it could be rephrased. Maybe the project is expecting a delay or something like that, instead of saying that it cannot be finished at all on time or something like that. Right?
Well, and what do we know from the previous email, right? We know that we're on track for the key pieces of the project. So in theory, the update, sure, the overall timeline may be delayed, but we're on track for the key, like for the core critical components for the key stakeholder. So yeah, I agree. This is true, but nobody even cares. It's not, or at least it shouldn't be the focus, given that the key pieces are on track. All right, so what did we do? Again, I've reread this and was thinking through what could be done better, but let's just go with what we have here. So one, sure, this is a longer email. We'll give everyone, I'll give everyone a minute or two to read through, and then I'll talk through the overall thought process and what we changed from the previous email. Karthik, since you know all of these mysterious people, I think you might have been seen.
Nourah knows who Emily is.
Emily's a tough cookie. All right, so I'll just start talking through what we did here. So one, as discussed on the previous slide, right up front. So we opted to. So this was sent by the partner, given just the sensitive nature and the senior level of the client here. Straight to the point. So we did opt to share the bad news first because they already knew about it, right? So it's just acknowledging it up front, but then you get it out of the way. You don't belabor the point. You say, here's the issue, slow support, but we do have good support from Jim. We don't want to throw him under the bus because he's also a pretty important person and he's been a good ally for the ZS team. He's not doing anything wrong here. So that's the first piece. And it's kind of balancing being factual and respectful while avoiding throwing Jim under the bus. And while setting things up so that we can also focus on quickly on what went well, right? So sure, there's a delay with the project, but significant progress was made. And here are all the cool things that we did, right? So this could be done in bullet form. For this email, we did not do that, but it's still pretty short, pretty to the point. Here's what we did. Here's all the great stuff. We did this lit review. We did all of the near-term things Jim was focused on. So we have those completed. Assessment that there are no major gaps and a workable model could be put together for future use with customer studies, blah, blah, blah. And then we're waiting on feedback from the team to confirm their agreement. So we were very clear. We've done a lot. We've met Jim's near-term priorities. We do need feedback from the team and we're waiting on it to make sure that they agree. But we don't say, you know, we're not yet sure. We can't be completely certain until the team agrees. It's just we're waiting for them to share additional input. So that's one piece. And then two, we're very clear about what we are doing, right? We outlined the approach to the model. So we've basically gotten ahead on the next steps of this project, but we paused. We're clear that on the ZS side, this is no longer in our court, at least for now. We need confirmation from the core team, but we're not just posing the problem. And this is perhaps what we could have done better, right? We're very clear that we're taking next steps. So we're finding time for a live review. This would be a live review with the full team that's needed, including those two folks who aren't giving input after the steering committee. So we're escalating this where we're bringing in the most senior level person. We're scheduling a live review, knowing that the two key people who are ignoring us probably cannot ignore a meeting with this very high level person. And we're handling all of it, right? We're proactively reaching out to the admin, the senior level person, to schedule that meeting. We're not asking anyone else to do it. And then lastly, again, this is more for documentation than anything else, which is what did we promise and what did we deliver? Just being very clear about that simple table that can be cut and pasted, just it's right there and documented. So overall, I think just to add a couple key points, we acknowledge the issue. We give props or kind of good words where the good words are due, Jim. We turn a bad situation into something more positive. There's a delay. Key pieces are on track. They're going well. We're all set there. And we basically call out exactly what the issue is and confirm that we are handling it and escalating things appropriately. So I think, again, not a fun email to write. The email is basically things aren't going well and your team is ignoring us, but it's phrased in a way, in about as positive a way as possible, while also having a clear path forward and letting the senior level person know that we are bringing them in to basically use their weight to get the feedback that we need. But we're trying to minimize the level of effort needed from them. We're still doing everything. They just need to show up and tell their team to get shit. Last thing I'll add as one MISC note, and then I'll open it up. You'll notice no pleasantries here, right? We didn't say, hope your week is going well, all of that. The only reason is with this client, that we were just in very regular contact with them, almost daily contact, at least around the time this email was sent. So it just wasn't needed, you know. we talked to them earlier in that same day. It's basically just a follow-up. So it felt like it would add kind of fluff without adding love. All right, any questions or comments? What do you all think about this email and trying to turn a bad situation into something more palatable?
Just a comment. We run into the situation very often, with mostly on because of scope creeps. Our client is trying to extract more out of the services that we have initially signed up for on paper in reality. So, and then, like, you know, let's say we promised them 2 iterations on an essay. They come back to us asking 5 iterations. with the most weird excuses. So we are, we need to give them bad news and tell them that they cannot scope creep. We need to tell them that our team is doing well and stuff. Or sometimes they over exaggerate the small mistakes we do. If we missed something here or missed something there, and keep us accountable for those small mistakes in the scope of the larger things. So this is a very relevant example we can go back to quite often. Just wanted to let you know.
Karthik, is there a way? So two thoughts for the small mistakes. Is there is it literally there's a small mistake that could be easily fixed and they try to turn fixing that small mistake into an entirely new iteration with a lot of other changes?
Absolutely. And then they keep quoting that small mistake over and over again. Every time we come up with a genuine, to justify a scope creep.
Yeah, okay. I think if helpful, we should talk more about that just later after the session, but that's always a challenge. And again, you see at ZS as well, right? I mean, with this lovely client, Emily, very good client in that they trust us. We get a ton of business from them. We also do about 150% of what we promised them. They sign a scope of work with us and assume that you and I are just owned by the project, right? So that's super normal. How do you push back? I mean, part of it ends up being like, yes, but, right? And I'm sure this probably isn't helpful. I'm sure you know all of it, but yeah, sure, we can do this, but this is what it would mean. Or, oh, we made this small mistake, so, apologies for that. Here, we already fixed it. Here's the updated version. Those other changes that you talked about, we can do them, but here's what it would mean. We need to charge you more. The timeline's delayed. We will not do this other thing you asked for, whatever it may be. So we can park that for now, but that is one of the both fun and frustrating components of client management.
And I think for CAAPID Simplified team, it's the one of highest importance. So we'll come back to that later.
Especially as a small company, because as a startup, the clients know that they're important for you because they know that if you're that small, you don't have that many clients. That's tough. Honestly, I'll also ask my brother, since again, he's now about 50 employees, has grown a lot over the last 5 years with his startup, and he still faces the issues, but I think it was a lot more challenging when he had like 2 customers that were 80% of his revenue. So I'll ask him what the hell he did to address those issues.
Sure. Diwakar, you had something to share?
Yeah, so I was exactly thinking through what Dan said. So if there is something that is bypassing, or if there is something where the expectations are not met, like how to come about those, like that you mean about the iteration, right? So if there are 2 iterations, what if the candidate comes for the 3rd iteration? How is it going to work? So those kind of things, which also means about the monitoring, about charging them also.
Yeah, I think this is a separate discussion, Diwakar, which we can have more one-on-one with the team that's managing clients. But it'll be great to get Dan's perspective on that. Even share some of the messages we are receiving from clients when they get super frustrated and start blaming us, to give him some context of how he can help. But
I need to think about it more, but would be happy to help. I mean, this is so easy to say and tough to do, but step 1 is just make sure that there are no issues, right? I think the goal, and it's impossible to do 100%, but one of the main goals is have the quality at such a high level where if they're complaining about something, what they're complaining about is ridiculous and not valid. Because as soon as they have a valid complaint, even if it's small, it gets a lot harder to defend your position as they try to turn that complaint into something much bigger. Again, I'm thinking of Karthik specifically, right? Our friend Meredith, whom you know, right? Any tiny thing that's even remotely off, like a typo or like a missed capitalization, all of a sudden becomes a big deal. And you're like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, calm down. But the trick to solving for that is 1, not taking it personally when it's called out and figuring out how to respond appropriately, but 2, not giving them that opportunity so that when they're calling things out, you kind of look at it and you can tell yourself and your team and respond appropriately, like, these aren't issues. This is just the person trying to find a problem where there is none. But yeah, let's talk about that. That sounds good. I know it's already been over an hour. Time weirdly flies. Go to one more slide before we do the brief writing exercise. Right, so what are some best practices? These are super simple. I have additional thoughts for each, but first is just know your purpose and consider the most appropriate communication medium for that purpose. So what do I mean here, right? Email often is not the right format for something. It often is, but like it works for more formal updates. It works for documentation of things. It works for some action items and decision-making, especially if the decision-making is relatively simple, but it doesn't work for a lot of other things. i.e., anytime a decision actually needs to be made and it's not super straightforward, or if there are multiple decisions, that should be a call or a Zoom, a video call, whatever it might be, something handled live, or super simple one-on-one updates. Karthik, we were talking about this earlier. Can you just text them or send them a message on WhatsApp, right? Does it really need to be an email? Or if we're sharing bad news, right? The email that we just reviewed with that bad news, if that was the first the client heard of it and we hadn't given them a heads up live, their reaction probably would have been a lot more negative. It's a lot easier to kind of add the human element and to talk through quick questions and just set the right context live. And then you can send a follow-up detailed email after with more info, but that should not have been the start there. And it wasn't. So that's the first one. Second is consider your audience, right? Know your audience and adjust the email accordingly. What I mean is, we've talked about some of this with those email examples. Know if they would want the good or the bad news first. Know if they want literally just the key, like what's your ask before all the info, or if they prefer to get a little bit more context so they can think through the information before you put the ask in. There are a million different versions of this, but the one that I often see used is the different colors of personalities, right? There's like blue, red, green, yellow, and one is like the decision maker. Just tell them what they need to decide and they'll do it. And then you can throw info before. Blue, they need all the information up front. Or yellow, they're really into understanding all the context and the politics, and they want to make sure that they understand who thinks what. So different personality types have different preferences for how you communicate in your emails. That goes a little bit beyond the 101 context that we're talking through today, but it's something to keep in mind. Just think about who you're emailing. Think about how they would want to receive the information. And if you have a request for them, think about what info they need to appropriately think through the request. Third is keep it as succinct as possible. Now, again, this goes into the art of things like how do you give all of the right info and come across as a human versus a robot, but do so in a way where it's still easy to scan and still relatively short. Thinking through this, I have a couple just rules of thumb that work for me, but again, are not the way to do it. So I'll write out all the info that I think is needed. And then after writing all that out, I will just brutalize it, reformat, cut things down. I go through probably 5-6 iterations minimum for an exec level email, where I start with a much longer one and then cut it down a lot over time, just really clearly thinking through what's actually needed and what did I just put in there because I was writing stream of consciousness. So essentially, if you write out an email and you're ready to send it, and it's to a client, you're not ready to send it. Read it again and think through what should be reformatted, what should be cut down. And the last piece is for emails, right? You want it to be super easy to scan, this fourth one right here. So we talked through most of this in the context of the examples, but given how busy mid and senior level execs are, you need to make it so easy for them to do their job. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you want, or if you do, you'll get it from a kind of an annoyed client versus someone who is just responding the way you want them to respond. So shorter paragraphs with spaces between them, using the @ functionality when it's appropriate, right? When you want to call one person's attention to something. This is a tough one to decide on appropriately, but bolding and color coding. I'm a fan of both, but it's really easy to overdo it, right? So you want to use bolding and color coding when needed to draw attention to the important parts of the email. But if everything is highlighted and bolded and red, it's use your judgment. It can be used selectively. Don't overuse that. And then the last thing, or I guess the last two things, is a lot of the time you want to put most of the time you want to put the key information up front. So for open up the email on your phone. If you can't figure out what the main info is and what the question is, if there is a question, or what the call to action is, with either no or minimal scrolling, you should probably restructure the email a little bit, right? Imagine that our friend Emily from the previous email, most of the stuff she reads is probably going to be on the go from her phone, So you want it to be super easy to see there. And then lastly is clarifying who's responsible for any call to action, right? Who's responsible, and if there's a timeline expectation, what is it? We'd love your input. If you have any thoughts, please share by 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, right? Versus just, hey, share your thoughts when possible, because then they might come back 2 weeks later and you didn't specify the timeline. So you kind of need to incorporate their thoughts or have an awkward conversation telling them that you won't. So all of those additional points that I just talked through, kind of the context behind these four best practices that I try to keep in mind while writing emails, they're all in the speaker's notes. So you'll have the cheat sheet after this. Before we move to the interactive writing exercise, any final questions or comments on the business emails 101 section?
If you have to quote another email on an email you're writing now, do you do it as a reply all, or like do you like mention, do you help them remember the context, like by mentioning it once more?
It depends. I know that answer is really frustrating, but for example, right, if we go back to these examples, if our friend Meredith or Mike basically said like, hey, send me the materials, why didn't you send them, right? I would probably reply to that email and attach the original email where we sent the materials. Say, hey, just for reference, this is when we sent them, here they are. And then that way they know, right? If I'm just saying, oh, per our discussion last week, and I'm kind of trying to like just remind them and set the context, right, that we had a discussion last week. Or for example, in this email, in a couple of weeks since we last spoke at the workshop, we're referencing what we agreed to in the workshop or have in our notes, right? And this is all captured in the meeting minutes from that workshop, but we're not recopying those meeting minutes. The full minutes don't feel appropriate here. So it depends on the context. I would usually not recopy old emails unless either they're trying to call you out on something and you just want to document that you did send the old email, or right, for example, for Maurice, so internally when we're sending ZS emails, we know that we often have requests for Maurice, the partner that we work with, for context for the rest of the folks on the line, and he just gets probably 1,000 emails a day. I don't know, so many that he's never going to find those emails that we need feedback on. So we'll consolidate into one, right? And we'll say, hey, here are the 3 requests we have for you. Each of these attached emails has more context.
Okay, yeah. So it's not a common practice in India to attach one email in another email, but you can start doing that. You can just drag the email from your inbox over to a new message folder, and you can attach a previous email as an attachment. That's
and so I would say again, there's no, I would generally lean away from doing that for the most part, but there are probably actually more situations than I experience within your business where that is needed, where customers asks a question, it's already been answered, or they bring something up where like there was already clear agreement. In that case, then yeah, I'd probably attach the email that has the agreement or has the answer that was already provided, whatever it may be. But do so politely, right? For reference, just wanted to share this last email where we agreed on this versus, no, you're wrong. This is where you said something else. Cool. Any other questions? Right. Now we get to the fun part. I can stop talking for a while. Okay, what we're gonna have here, I'll just pull it up. I know everyone's gonna start reading immediately, but we're gonna spend 20 minutes and we can shift the timing as needed. But basically, I want you all to write something, right? So write an email. So there are 2 options, 2 just made up situations that I came up with here. And you can write made up emails responding to these prompts. Or if there's another topic of your choosing, right? If there's a specific client email that you need to respond to, or if you have an upcoming meeting, or if there's an email outside of this context that's more relevant to you, feel free to use that as the topic and just write it So what we're going to do is I'll give everyone 20 minutes so we can all go on mute for a bit to write one email. If you have time for two, sure, go for it. Although to be frank, I think if you're putting in the right level of thought, 20 minutes is not unreasonable if it's to a relatively senior person or a client. So we'll give you 20 minutes to write. Then we'll spend 40 minutes. Again, we can tweak this as needed. I think we're a little behind schedule, but we'll spend basically the rest of the time reviewing and discussing the emails. So I will be asking for volunteers. Karthik, you're going to be voluntold if no one else wants to jump in. And we'll discuss some of them live and just get thoughts from the group, right? 100% judgment-free zone. This is meant to be super low stakes where it's just sharing what you wrote and what you could consider reworking in the future. And for anyone where we don't have time to review live, because we do have more folks than I'd initially expected on the call, which is great. I'll share my contact info at the end of this. You'll have my email, my LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to share thoughts offline or to set up just a quick one-on-one in the future if you want additional thoughts. So with that, let the group read these two prompts. And if you have questions, either type them into the box or just ask them. I'll just be here hanging out for the next 20 minutes or so. And with that, let me actually add a specific time. I apologize. I don't know exactly what time it is in India right now. Is it 10.5 hours ahead of the East Coast? 9.5?
Yeah. You can just subtract 1.5 hours. So if it's 9:20 in Central, it's going to be 8:10. Sorry, I'm blabbering. 7:50. Yeah, 7:50 in India. 7:50 p.m.
7:50. All right. So let's say at 8:25 India time, we'll start. I will start asking for volunteers with Karthik as our sacrificial voluntold participant.
Karthik, do you want again to split everyone into teams or just take it individually?
I think individual is better. Yeah, it'll just take more time if we were to discuss this in writing.
If anyone has questions, by the way, feel free to just message me privately in the chat as well.
Yeah, if you need like context on what commercial or medical is, they may be very ZS centric. So just please text Dan and he'll clarify.
Karthik, I was going back to the earlier point of using abbreviations and just, yeah, information that should be clarified. So let me know. how's everyone doing? Would another 10 minutes be helpful?
Yes.
All right, give it 10 more. How is everyone feeling?
I've created my draft for you to hack through, Dan.
There'll be no hacking, just thoughts and questions. But Karthik, I mean, before I put you on the spot, does anyone else feel like they want to share? Will anyone save Karthik?
Yeah, so
Yes, I can. For now.
Awesome. So why don't we do it?
Or-
Yeah, let me maybe I'll stop screen sharing. Actually, hold on, let me put this up for one more moment. So if folks want to take a screenshot, just so you have these two prompts for reference, I'll then stop sharing so that we can whoever is sharing their email draft. Put it on too. Alrighty. And stop. I hear that someone had volunteered to share their draft.
Yes, Matt. Sharing my screen. Can I?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Able to see the screen.
Yeah, looks like it's coming up.
Okay.
All right. So do you want to, here, I'll read it, but do you want to walk us through just the overall thinking and any notes that you want us to keep in mind?
I think I can walk you through the context of how this has been written. Maybe that helps instead of reading it out. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That okay?
That sounds great.
Yeah. So first of all, the thing that was taken was the mail that needs to be sent out to the client side stakeholder in case of there is no response from the POC, the point of contact, from one of the client's core team member over the project. So that's the thing that I took up. And writing in response to that, the subject would state like this: the name of the project, Project ABC, seeking immediate response from the client side, from the name of the client or something like that. And Jim is the person that is on the client side core team, from whom we didn't receive a response after a couple of attempts, right? The first thing, the first paragraph addresses whether he is safe or fine, and then we would like to tell that everything till date has been moving smoothly and successfully till the current and the past till the past and the current milestones. And yeah, we thank them for the coordination over the project journey till date. And now we would also like to bring this upon. However, this is to bring to your kind notice that there has been a situation which needs immediate response. That is, we need inputs from on these areas mentioned in the previous thread. I didn't mention these here, as early as possible or as soon as possible. But unfortunately, we are not able to reach out or connect with the concerned person, that is the POC, in spite of trying to make many attempts to communicate over different channels. And we tell them that this is very crucial for us to stay on track and stick to our projected deadlines of the project. Then in the second paragraph, we address the other stakeholder who can be reached out to, who was passed to CC, that is Matt, saying that we would like to understand if there is anything that we could do from our end or extend hands of support from our side to help the situation progress to the next successive steps. Also, we would appreciate if he's actually responding to the situation quickly on or before certain date by helping us provide the necessary inputs or connect us to someone else in spite of other than Jim in the same team who can help this progress. And finally, we again address what to ensure your status. Two things. One is getting the relationship, since we have been working with Jim for a very long time as a client side coordinator. So checking his status and also our successful, we want to take this collaboration throughout the project. That's what we say. And finally, tagging both Jim and Matt through the symbol. We say that these are the expected delays just in case if the turnaround is going to be later, not the address date. And the queries that needs to be answered, expected date of delivery, and the support that's required from the client side team, which is XYZ as mentioned. Yes.
I'm just writing out some notes as I read through as well.
Yeah. I was just checking if I was on mute all this time.
No. I was, apologies, been writing out notes. So no, I do have thoughts. One, thank you for volunteering to be the first to share your email. I think, honestly, this is a fantastic start. 20 minutes is also not a long time, just to put that out there, right? It can be if the email is simple, but for something like this, like that email in theory could easily take an hour after you've finished writing, refining, re-refining, all of that. So the time was pretty tight. Before I share thoughts, I honestly would love to hear from the rest of the group as well. Does anyone else have thoughts on what they think this does well and where you would start to ask questions about what might be changed? Karthik, I'm looking at you if no one else jumps in, because I know we've
Sure.
had plenty of conversations around emails.
Mm-hmm. I'll jump in, giving a pause for everybody else to contribute.
Then, can I pull out my screen for no?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know this will not be sounding so professional from me, but I tried my best,
Hari, do you mean you want to go next and showcase your screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I not audible?
No, you are. We were thinking whether you're sharing feedback on this draft or you were planning to go next.
Sorry. Sorry for that.
No problem.
So,
I would say it creates some kind of panic, but it sounds like it creates some kind of panic.
So I think things could be framed a little bit differently, right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about how to do that in a moment, but yes, it's not that it will create a sense of panic, but it does definitely create the sense that you are not in control of the situation, right? That hopefully things get back on track, but that if so, the only way for that to happen would be for Jim to respond. And if he doesn't, then, there's nothing that you can do at this point.
I wanted to
We'll talk through
over the subject.
Okay, so connecting with someone else might also increase the delay of the project. So I wasn't sure whether it can be ordered or
not. Sorry, can you please come again?
I said I found a sentence like, please provide the necessary inputs or connect with someone else on your team who can help with the same. So I'm not sure if swapping works, since Jim is the person, the client side team member, like he's the committed one to work with. Yeah, these are the two things that I had on my mind.
I think this one is most valid. Yes, I'll take this. because we have had those situations. Swapping takes more time than finding one. I mean, like finding the same person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Go on, Diwakar.
yeah, just the like headings, kind of the updates and so on. So it doesn't really look like a story, and it is just on point.
Which one? Which one?
Just adding subheading kind of things so that it looks better rather than kind of story. I mean to say keeping things on point.
Okay, it's like a lot of pros and not to the point. Okay, cool.
Can I go next?
Yeah, go on, Flynn.
Yeah, so one is what Diwakar mentioned, points are missing, so it's a lot of information. Another thing, a lot of spelling mistakes, I think, very evident, a lot of them. Sorry, Venkat. And another third thing, something that was good that I noticed is I personally, it was being mentioned before, I like how there's a person, when there's a person touch the email, I think that's always required. A lot of us in the name of being professional sort of don't do that. So here I like how Venkat started with the line, of course, the pleasantry, and also giving an update as to we could navigate through the project and we reached a milestone and all that. That I think is a good thing. I'm guessing if he had more perspective, it would be a more detailed line with detailed meaning, a more specific line stating this project, this milestone, but this is a template, right? So for this, I think that first couple of lines is a good step to let them know whether we're on track or what's happening. So yeah, that's
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things can be definitely improved, Venkat. I'm sure. Thank you for using Notepad and being, not cheating with the spelling and grammar things that come on autocorrect. That's definitely the subject line, right? The subject line seems to be like, as long as they respond to this email, the job is done. Well, that's not the subject. The subject is like seeking input to complete a certain project milestone or something like that. That is the key thing, action item. Yeah, sorry, Dan.
No, and it could even be, right. It's tough because you want it to be descriptive, but you also want it to be like basically fit on one line. You don't want it to be too long. So it could be, project ABC, input required ASAP or something like that. But yeah, Karthik agreed.
And then, so the first line, if you see the first paragraph, it has like 4 different themes within the first paragraph. It starts from pleasantry, project update, and then it goes on to say that there's a delay. And then it also mentions like that we've been doing the right thing from our end, right? So I think we're jumbling too many things together. We could have just mentioned about a quick update, address the email to Matt, maybe if he's the client stakeholder, and give him the update, and then say, okay, there is a delay pending so and so inputs. I think that's a very, very big thing. And the second thing I think we learned from the hackathon now was trying to be a little more helpful in spite of the situation, in spite of the person not responding to our previous attempts to reach out to them, trying to be a little more helpful in asking Jim to provide input, saying, hey, Jim, this would not be a blocker. We would be able to proceed with time. However, how can we facilitate receiving inputs before completing this activity? Something a little more helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it was a blocker for the project that was mentioned there. And yes, I think this sentence maybe talks that how could we work together or extend hands for help or support to make sure we progress on this or to see some progress on this. Is that okay?
So the inputs is expected from Jim, correct? Not Matt.
Yes, but since Jim is not responding, Matt is the person who will be taking it forward as he's going to be CC'd. Because however, Jim is not.
Nope. Let me add just a tiny bit of context. So I see we're almost on the same page. So Jim, the input is critical, right? So Karthik, this is, and again, this varies, right? So sometimes it's important, but not critical, in which case you basically just tell them what you're doing and we're moving forward and they give input if needed. If it's actually critical and you cannot move forward without the input, which is the case here, so that was correct. how do you do so? And I'll give some thoughts on that in just a moment, but Matt wouldn't be taking it over, right? So, and again, it's hard to give all of the right context in the email, but in this specific situation, the idea is that Matt is Jim's boss and is kind of is the Emily from the previous emails, the highest up. But they're not going to be actually making the decision. They just need visibility into the project because they're the highest level sponsor. So if something goes wrong, they need to know about it. And if they then want to push on Jim, right, if they're CC'd on this and they then call Jim and say, no, you need to do this now, drop everything else, they can do that. But we wouldn't be giving them the, we wouldn't. Yeah, I'll pause there for a moment, Karthik. I think you're on a roll with feedback, so I'll save my thoughts for another moment.
Oh, okay.
So do you have any other thoughts to share?
Yeah, I think the only other thought, and I'm sure looking forward to your feedback as well. The only other thought was we can, it's like a wake up call, right? Like you're basically putting Jim under the bus and you're telling that your boss is on this mail CC, so you better get back. Yeah, I think that wake up call can be a little more clear, either by saying, hi, can we get in a common meeting with Matt, or can we get to Matt by this deadline and help him share our inputs with him? So it's like, we are in this together, but we need to report out to your senior manager. I think I would position him that way, and it just holds him accountable. Okay, now I'm not doing you a favor. I'm going to do it because I need to keep my job in place.
So Karthik, it could even be, Matt CC'd here, mentioned earlier that he needs this by XYZ date, so you're very clear about that.
How I personally think it to be is not Jim who saw it and not responded. So that could be some other problem. So we don't know the problem at the first place. So that's the email that goes out, understanding what's the problem at the first place, whether it could be like he's out on COVID. We don't know, right? That's and that could not be at the first step itself saying that, hey, your boss is on this CC and we need to report it. So the first could be like first understanding the problem and then taking it to further steps. Yeah, this was my thought when
and so here, and so this, I left this a little bit open, right? There are a million ways that you could address this. And so in the background context, this is basically the last resort. So you've already emailed, texted, left voicemails for Jim, like you've done everything, and Jim's boss, Matt, knows about the situation, right? So the key client stakeholder, Matt, is aware, but just doesn't have the bandwidth to own it themselves. So they need you to do what is needed. So I think there are a couple of things. One, I agree with all of the feedback shared so far. So I think all of that is spot on. And again, not a lot of time to write this email. So a lot of it is totally understandable, but it's good to keep in mind. Spelling, breaking up that first paragraph. Karthik, that was my first thought as well, right? Was pleasantries are great. Calling out the issue is great, but all of this feels a little bit jumbled. So I would break that out into multiple paragraphs. And again, this is very different, right? I was taught as a kid, you want to have the introductory sentence, the 3 content sentences, and the closing sentence of each paragraph. No, not for business emails. You want to have 1 to 2 sentences, and then you move on to the next paragraph or line break. But so no, a couple other thoughts that I had added as I was reading through this. So one, yes, we can kind of soften that piece up front, right? It's, hey, thanks so much for your support as we've progressed to XYZ point in this project. As you know, we need your input on XYZ to continue moving forward. And then from there, so where do we go, right? I would not CC Matt. So thinking through how to basically get what we need, you kind of have to use, and this is a little bit of business email, a little bit of just politics. So it's not, I'm kind of mixing and matching topics here, but they're very heavily related. How do you use Matt without completely throwing Jim under the bus and without kind of asking Matt for time that they don't have the bandwidth? So I would do something like, hey, Jim, we'll try calling you again later today. As an FYI, also working with Matt's administrative assistant, to set up a live review tomorrow so we can meet the end of day deadline or something like that, right? So you're leveraging kind of the power or the influence of Matt, the boss, but you're not asking Matt to really do much yet. You're just working with Matt's assistant to put something on the calendar that Jim cannot skip it. And if he does skip it, he gets in trouble for the delay, not you. That's, there's nothing else you can do beyond calling, texting, emailing, and setting up a meeting with their boss. But you frame it in such a way where you say something like, working with Matt's admin to set up this meeting tomorrow. If you're able to provide feedback before then, very happy to cancel the meeting and save everyone's time, or something like that, so that you make them take action. If they don't, they get in trouble. And if they do, everyone saves time. So you have like a hard deadline that it's not just them being accountable to you, you are making them accountable to their boss. And then you could also say something like, as previously discussed with Matt, we need this by end of day. Really appreciate your support. Thanks again. Something like that. So I would say that's the main piece. So I think that other than breaking up the first paragraph and the spelling, the typos, those pieces, the main thing is, how do you take a bad situation where you've done everything you can and you're essentially telling on this person, telling on them to their boss, how do you take the need to do that and frame it in a way where you're not adding a ton of additional work for the boss and you're still giving them, the client stakeholder, Jim, the ability to save face. If they're, if I were Jim, I would then think, oh, crap, like I better look at this now. And I'd respond and say, hey, whatever. They would then give feedback via email and then probably call you one-on-one so that they don't have to get their boss involved. The only other thing I'll say is, and this, again, in such a short time frame, I think it's fine not to have this. I would add bolding somewhere in an email this long, perhaps on the specific sentence or two about scheduling that meeting so that attention is drawn there for both Matt and for Jim. Does that make sense? Again, I'm not saying this is the best way to do it, but it's how I would have handled an email like this.
Yes, Dan. Thanks for that feedback, especially the last one. Leveraging the boss and not asking him to work what's not done.
And so you're not saying, and then you don't need that stuff about the delays at all, because there's not going to be a delay. Or if there is, it'll be after Jim skips the meeting with his boss. And so the boss is already mad at Jim and not you. And hopefully that doesn't happen, but that way you're also covering yourself.
Got it.
I want to add something. Like during the hackathon, I learned we should be more supportive. So what I wrote in my draft was I'll be saying Matt for that, say, I have communicated the deadline of project to be, say, June 14 with Matt. I'll end up the email by saying I look forward to hear back from you. In case you have limited time to revert back through an email, we can connect over a quick call so that I can communicate the deadlines with Matt too, if it's a delay.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I like that idea a lot. I think the only minor consideration I'll throw out there is that we've already tried to email and call and text Jim multiple times, right? So saying, hey, can we connect live or can we connect on a call? He's not going to respond to that. So I agree completely with the thought of wanting to be as supportive as possible. I would proactively say, I'll give you a call later today, or if there's a specific time that works for you, let me know. So you're taking it out of his hands. You're going to call him. Matt, the big boss, knows you're going to call him. You're also scheduling that meeting with Matt, the big boss, and Jim. You're basically handling it from all fronts, right? You're being as supportive as you can, but you're not giving Jim any power to just not move things forward. You're giving him the option of either moving things forward with you, whether it's via call or email or whatever, or if not, getting in trouble. Because at this stage, your project is on the line and you don't have many other options. You're basically being as supportive as possible while also putting your foot down in a very reasonable way, and just clarifying that if they don't respond, it's in their court. There's, and the other thing I'd say is Karthik, per your point earlier, right? If there was someone out, if we could either move forward without Jim's input, or if there's another team member that we could reach out to, right? At this point, I would just say, hey, Jim, let us know if there's anyone from your team that can provide this input. Currently planning to reach out to Jane or whoever it might be. If there's someone specific in mind that you think could help, and just proactively, again, take action. Basically, I think that the bottom line is wherever you can, be supportive in the email, but don't give an out where there is an option where things do not move forward. Because if you get to this stage, that's the option that'll end up becoming the reality. I purposely gave a situation, by the way, that's pretty frustrating to handle. So, if, you know, this goes a little bit beyond business email 101, writing out meeting minutes. But I thought it'd be a little more interesting than pretending we were writing out meeting minutes.
You'd be surprised, Dan. This could be Diwakar and Flynn's day to day. These kind of emails.
I'm sorry.
Can I stop sharing? Anyone?
Yeah,
pulling it?
I think Hari wanted to go next.
And just one more call out. So I know, again, we will not have time to go through everyone's emails live. So for anyone that does want feedback after the session, again, you'll have my email. Happy to do so offline or to set up.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks for offering.
Yes. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Karthik. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So on context of it, what is was I first thought it would not be undermining my company like a startup. I just it meeting in midway, like has several clients, so not too much boasting, but should be like boasting, like we have other priorities. But in context of that, I written this mail actually. At first I greeted them, and then confronted them that there's no help from this for a critical gap in architecture, so that for several days the project has been in hold, and for that we are requesting you for halting the project from our side. So unfortunately, the lack of responsiveness for that case I'm mentioned, and after that, so due to this reason, I wanted this time to pull my resources into another project, so that there should be a lot of save, right? Like that type of boasting I'm saying, like walking on the tightrope, not too much of bad or bad negative reviews, and not too much of boasting in between. That I'm saying, that was I meant to meet. I'm sorry, my communication could be like this lacky. Is there anything couldn't be understand? Please let me know.
I'm just reading through the email, but we'll ask any clarifying questions.
Sure.
But let me just make sure I understand the context, and apologies if I'm getting this wrong, but essentially, right, you're working with one client and the project is it's being delayed because they're not giving you what you need. And so the request is basically, can the team working on this client pause to work on a project for another client for a couple of days? Is that true, or is it another project for the same client?
Yes, that haven't been figured out, but similar to that, yeah. Like not for same client, or it could be another client. Just that this project has been held for the not responsiveness from this team, that XYZ team.
All right, I'll write out a few thoughts, but if, again, same as the last time, if anyone from the team has reactions to share, please jump in.
At a very high level, it's kind of unclear, Hari, what you're trying to communicate. So, I mean, the good thing is you've split it into paragraphs, and each paragraph has its own theme. Like the first paragraph is your greeting. The second one is describes how you need the consent, which is in your subject line, how you need consent to complete some activity. I think the dates below are unnecessary, like because you have like one activity and just one consent input. Then the next paragraph goes on to say that because you're not getting a response, there has been a gap. So it clearly outlines the problem. and the fourth paragraph, to me at least, is a little unclear. Are we suggesting a solution? Are we requesting compromise, or what exactly that is? But that's just the way it's written. Apart from that, I think the breaking it down piece is really good. One more thing I would mention is, yeah, so the line about we have requested a massive significant input, right? That sounds like you've asked for a lot of information from the client, but your okay, maybe you have asked a lot of input and that's what's not come through. But the ask here is not about providing input to complete the project. The ask here is more like, will you help us stop the current project, right? Pause the current project. I think I'm just like reading out my thoughts rather than giving you specific feedback. The good feedback is splitting up the paragraph. I think just an opportunity for improvement is being a little more clear around what the ask is for this email versus what else are you trying to communicate.
Okay, got it. Thanks for the feedback, Karthik. Thank you.
Yep. So Karthik, I second everything you said. I would say again, as Karthik mentioned, the email is structured well. So the question for me is more, what's the purpose behind it, right? Exactly as Karthik mentioned. Who is this going to, right? And what are we actually asking them for? And so, I mean, a couple thoughts on that. In a situation like this, so not even tying to the email, but just general kind of how I would think about client management. If there is, so the way that this is framed, it's basically saying there's a problem, it's on your end. Can you give us permission to go do something else? And so that's probably not how I would frame it, right? If there's a problem, I would try to package in a solution alongside it. And the working on something else would be more of an FYI versus a request. For example, right, if we need massive input from a specific team, we'd say, hey, you know, looks like we've had challenges connecting with XYZ team to get this critical input needed. And then you can attach the emails if absolutely needed. And you can say, hey, maybe more effective to discuss live, we will schedule a meeting on XYZ date or XYZ week to get this required input. As an FYI, in the meantime, we'll need to shift resources due to this delay. But if you're able to provide feedback by end of day or end of the next day, we'll ensure that we have the appropriate support for this project. Something like that. So you're saying there's an issue, it's on your end, but you're saying it nicely. Here's what we're going to do to solve that issue, because what we've done so far isn't working. And here is the impact of that issue. We're going to go do this other thing, but if you're able to get us what we need, we'll come back to this project. Again, I don't know all the context, so that might not be the perfect solution, but that way it's informing, solutioning, and being very clear about the impact and the fact that the team is not going to be waiting around doing nothing while we try to get this critical info.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Dan. Really got that message.
Just an input. I know this is not relevant, but if you want to draft emails, the best place to draft it is in your email inbox. At least you can leverage the free autocorrect tools that you might have to, avoid spelling, grammar mistakes that we have. Instead of starting on Notepad, I'm surprised that we start on Notepad, but
this is like when I first started
Sorry, guys,
using.
I couldn't.
Sorry,
Sorry,
go on,
couldn't get
Karthik.
the last-
go on, Dan.
I think that just if you were asking what Karthik had said, the recommendation was to draft in Outlook or Gmail or whatever email client you use instead of Notepad. And I was just going to draw the parallel to the fact that when I started doing rough calculations on my computer, I will admit I was one of the only people I knew who used the calculator app, the built-in Windows calculator app in business school instead of Excel when I started. My classmates literally looked at me and said, "What the heck is wrong with you?" So anyway, as you get more comfortable with emails, Karthik is completely right. Outlook or Gmail is a lot easier and just more efficient than Notepad.
All right, I think we have time for just one more review, Dan, or do you want to go back and cover something in the deck?
No, this is Matt. So I'll share the deck so you'll all have it. So can share questions with me after. This is your time. So if we want to do one more review, or if we want to do a pitch, or whatever would be most valuable. I have fun reviewing emails. I'm weird in that I enjoy it. So I'm happy to do another.
Yeah, maybe we'll do one more review given it's 10 minutes, and then we can stop at the 2.5-hour mark. We'll reconnect for 2 other topics, which is the reverse pitch with our product ideas. I didn't know that your brother also is a product CEO. So we have 2 people to now evaluate our ideas. And then another smaller discussion around the kind of client emails we receive, especially the angry ones, and what can be a response strategy. So we'll have separate follow-ups for that. And we'll at least compensate you for that, because we're not compensating you for this. But for the time being, any other volunteer who wants to go next?
Yeah, so I have a smaller one, so I would want to check if that makes sense.
Go ahead, Diwakar.
Yeah, so over here, I address the core team member, and then like in the first paragraph, it will be the updates, like we have completed the primary milestones of project on time. I thank you for your support. The second thing will be the inputs for core milestones. So I'm stating that I've started working on core milestones of the project. I need your inputs from you to proceed further. I tried reaching you. I'm over here. I'm stating that I tried reaching you, but I couldn't connect. I would like to know your availability anytime before the mentioned time to get your input, so that it helps me to deliver the project on time. So over here, I'll be addressing both the core team member as well as the stakeholder. We are happy to support in order to complete the project on time. Yeah.
And just to make sure that I'm clear on this, would this be the first option, or is this a separate scenario that you wanted to write? First option of the difficult client scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we'll open it up to the team, but before then, I do think that a lot of the comments that we brought up in the first discussion on this email apply here as well.
Okay.
Not to repeat most of those, but again,
I think a few things are different from the first. The feedback we gave for Ankit's email, Diwakar, are you don't need to capitalize words that do not have, you've capitalized inputs in project to try to, I think, stress saying that, oh, we can complete the project, we need your inputs. While we speak, we give that stress, and we write script for a movie, we might capitalize words to stress. In emails, unless it's a proper noun, you don't really need to capitalize something unnecessarily. And I think that the word you have bolded, like started working on core milestone, that isn't the key message here. The key message is that you need their input. So probably if you had bolded inputs, we need your inputs before so-and-so date. If you had bolded that would have been like what strikes their mind. And the only last feedback I would give is, this is a huge problem. They've not been responding to your emails or whatever for so long. So you have the right to be a lot more assertive and say that, hey, there is a clear problem. We cannot proceed without your input, rather than being very pleasant. This is like overly pleasant. It's like absolutely everything is fine. Primary milestones are covered. We've in fact started even working on our current milestones. And all we need is a little help from you. This is for a person who's been ignoring you for like the past time completely.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I think
I think the only other thing is just in terms of structure. So part of this is personal preference again, but so looking at how this is split up, I like the format visually, right? There's very clearly update and inputs for core milestones. However, for this specific email, at least with the level of content that's in there now, it's so short already. I don't actually think that that's necessarily needed, right? It could be if I weren't going to change any of the content, which we would change it a bit, but if we're just structuring what we already have, I would do, I would have high core team member, comma, hope you are doing great on a separate line. But then I just combine, the update there. That feels like it could all be part of that same first intro. Hope you're doing great. As a quick update, we've completed the milestone. Thanks so much for your support. That's all basically one line or like 1.5 lines. It doesn't need to be 3 separate lines. And then you jump into the inputs for the core milestones. But again, it probably doesn't need that header. There are only 2 short paragraphs anyway in this email, or I guess 3 if you count the bottom one. So I think before this email was finalized, the content itself would change. But if you were just keeping what you had here right now, in this case, this could work, but it just feels like it's not completely needed because it's already so straightforward, right? Other than that, again, I think a lot of the feedback that we gave to Venkat earlier on probably applies here as well, including as Karthik mentioned, right? Being assertive but pleasant. So being very clear that the ball is in their court and also doing a little bit more than asking for their availability, since we know that they've ignored everything we've tried already, right? They haven't responded to emails or texts or anything like that. Yeah, at risk of repeating myself with the prior feedback, I think those are the new pieces. And Karthik, you got the main one. This is too nice. It's very nice, but if they then ignore us, right, and I'm the key stakeholder and I'm going back through my emails and reading this, my reaction would be, this was not nearly strong enough. I didn't understand the urgency in the email because it is framed so nicely.
Okay.
Lastly, you're also taking on responsibility here, right? If something goes wrong, the way you've written this email, it's your fault. So, I would like to know your availability so that it could help me to deliver the project on time. So then that kind of insinuates, or that gives the impression that the on-time delivery is 100% on you. And if it doesn't happen, that it's your fault. So the way, this opens you up a little bit more than it should to taking the fall when you should not be, given the context of this specific email or situation.
Okay, understood. Got it. So just a broader question apart from this, like will your emails be but narrative kind of, or will it be straight on to the point, or like I usually write emails in a shorter format, like being straight on the point. So how you usually like prefer kind of email?
Yeah, and I think straight to the point. So I usually write more than I should, right? So a big part of my editing for emails is actually cutting down the words. My initial draft is always way too long, and then I try to brutally cut out as much as I can. But I still write more than most other folks, and part of that is preference. I will say, if your tendency is to write short emails, that's great. That's actually usually, especially for a quick update, for anything like that, that's the best way to do it. And for anything internal, you can probably be less formal and just faster, get to the point. For exec-facing emails, it depends. So if it was a quick update where you're just sharing, 1 or 2 bullets, sure, you can get straight to the point. If there is a critical project issue and you need inputs that you're not getting and you've done everything you can to get those inputs, you probably should write a little bit. If this email becomes a mix of asking for the right inputs, but also documenting what you're doing, what you have done, and basically covering yourself. And in such an email, you want to include a little more detail. Okay. So I would write a little bit more in an email like that, where part of the purpose is providing full visibility to senior leadership about what's happening without being super blameful, but just factual, right? Factual and polite. I would want to give more info so that you have the right context written down that you can reference to later. If the person finally comes back, if the person who's been ignoring you finally comes back with a different story than the reality, you have it professionally, succinctly, but completely documented with a little bit more info.
Okay. Got it.
I know we only have another minute, so Karthik, I'll let you guide us in at the tail end of this, but I'm happy to answer questions or spend the time however is most helpful.
So Dan, I'm going to share your Gmail ID through the team, if that's okay.
Oh, apologies. Yeah, that's also in here. That's at the end of this. I'll send that out, but Karthik, you can also send it. My personal email on my LinkedIn.
Sure. I just thought we'll spend a few minutes like giving you feedback on the call, and then we can share the rest offline. So would love to read a direct message I received from an applicant, from a person who had to leave earlier. Please tell that thank you from me too. He's great, and thank you for bringing him to do this. This makes a difference. I wish I knew this beforehand. I would have made sure not to have anything else before. So that's one person's feedback from Kenza. Anyone else on the team would love to share feedback in the next quick 2 minutes? Then we can let Dan.
Let me also just throw out, I do not often do sessions like this, so I appreciate constructive feedback as well. I am positive there are many things I could do better. So I appreciate any and all feedback.
Thanks for that session, Dan. Till now, Karthik has been our email writing expert that we benchmark, and he would be actually giving the mentorships for writing emails to our clients and stakeholders. But yes, I also have a thought that people have different thoughts based on the industry they work and based on the roles they come from, right? As a consultant, Karthik has a different view. When I look at your email, it plays different. And I've seen technology companies writing it very, very short and precise. They don't want even to write big emails. Like what Divakar wrote was like a technology email. That's how people have been writing. That's one thing is my share of thought. That's it. Thanks a lot for your time. And yeah, it would be great if we can have your brother as well in one more hackathon, as Karthik mentioned. So I'm very excited. I don't know if we can get his time, but yes, thanks for your time at the first place.
I was going to say, I don't know if I can promise his time either, because he works all the time already, but I will ask and I'll let you all know. I think he'd be very interested. The question then just becomes, yeah, is it possible?
Thank you. And last but not least, thank you for respecting the session by coming in formals when no one else is there in formals. Thank you for that.
It was an excuse to put on a button down for the first time in weeks. So thank you all.
Anyone else, or we can close?
I want to share. So Dan, I have a learning disability. I had been struggling, in comprehending emails a lot, and I never got a chance to learn how do we draft an email. So after learning from you through this hackathon, I know even if I formulate emails in the bullet forms and all those key points you shared with me, I can draft a good email. Like so far I've been learning, no, I have to comprehend it a little bit. I have to, make it as lengthy as possible to express. You have given me a completely different insight, and it's really helpful. Thank you so much.
I'm very glad. And again, if you have questions moving forward, you have my personal email. So this is something that I genuinely do enjoy. So reach out with any questions.
Thank you. I'll do that.
Yeah, and your method of writing email also helps us, because like I used to brainstorm a lot in my mind without putting points on the email, whether should I add this or shouldn't, or so only a few points and then come to the email. So like putting all and then like cutting it off definitely makes sense, so that we ensure we have all the points that has to be considered for making decisions.
And that's not the only way to do it. I'll add that, right? There are many other ways. It's what works for me. So figured I would share that today.
Yeah, just one thing in closing. Venkat, to your point, even when Dan sends an internal email to the team, like say the CS team, he would not go through all of these steps. This is for executives. So in our case, like the people who pay us, our clients, or people who will pay us as investors, only for them do we need this due diligence. of course, spelling mistake is not excusable even with a colleague. But that being said, like if we would just send text or email, if it's like quick communication within the team, we don't like labor ourselves with that. So when you say technology emails, that's probably what Diwakar would send to his tech team as a coding partner, but not what he can afford to send to a client or an investor, right? In that sense.
And Karthik, I'm sure I've sent you plenty of emails that say something like, thanks, really helpful. And that's the whole email. Internal can be a lot more efficient for most contexts.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan. We're blessed to have you, and we'll keep in touch.
This was fun. Thank you all. We'll hopefully hear from you soon. And Karthik, again, I'll send out the deck so that you have it.
Perfect.
Take care, team.
Have a great day, team.
Bye now.
All right. I think this is one of our best hackathons, unless you thought otherwise. Except Flynn was playing hide and seek. She's on mute. Sorry. What, Nikita?
No, I said it was really good. It was something I think everybody could connect to, because everybody's written emails in the past, and it was really good.
Awesome. I would appreciate, Nikita, if you can start like a small email thread with all of our email IDs addressed to Dan, putting like a compliment, and then we'll all reply all on the same thing. He did specifically ask for feedback because he's never like taught people before. So if not feedback, at least you can send a compliment. It'll be a nice way of keeping him in touch with us. He's super influential. I've told a lot about him, Nourah. I think he's the ideal consultant. Like, he's gold standard in ZS.
Yeah, Karthik used to be scared of him.
Yeah, I used to be scared of him. I'll be like, if this guy is talking, imagine I'm in a meeting with him, I'm with the same rank as him, and he's talking to my client, and they think that is ZS. That is ZS quality. When they talk to me, they'll be like, who's this guy? You know, this is how he comes to every client meeting, formal, clean shaven, with that professional attitude, that same level of energy. It's like mind blowing. So he's like a gold standard consultant, and ZS recently lost him to a young startup. So blah blah. But anyways, so
yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, ZS last year.
You're also leaving ZS.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, congratulations for that.
You're also going out of ZS, not you last year.
As well.
I hope they'll say that inside the company that they lost me. Yeah, thank you. This is, I think, our decision. Align Technologies. It's in dentistry, so hopefully we'll make. Oh yeah, I think Lena doesn't know about this, right? Lena, I'll be joining Align Technologies. They make the Invisalign product. Do you know Invisalign? No.
Yeah, okay. I know.
Yeah, okay, fine. So yeah, I'm joining that company as a consultant, going out of ZS.
Okay.
And
okay.
As part of that company, I'll be working with 10 orthodontic practices each year, helping the practice improve, optimize itself. We believe this can eventually help us in CAAPID Simplified, because if somebody wants to invest, that Nourah will not be the only dentist. There'll be the dental industry, and if we want to expand, become a DSO or something, I'll have some field experience on the business side of dentistry. So that these were some strategic priorities.
Yeah, congratulations.
Cool, thank you. All right. And thank you, Praveen and Hari, for joining us. We'll let you all go. I know it's Saturday night.
Thank you, Rono. It is our honor to join this meeting.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool, guys. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.